This is Mrs. Thompson. We are looking at your lesson tonight for lesson 2.4 and 2.5. 2.4 and 2.5 lesson actually works with multiplication and dividing integers. Multiplying and dividing integers. So when we multiply and divide integers, we have a couple of rules. Key thing to keep in mind, the word for multiplication, one word is product. In tomorrow's lesson, we're going to talk, actually next week, we're going to talk a lot more about more vocabulary and how to interpret it. But tonight, product of two integers means we're multiplying. When they have the same sign, our answer is positive. Or another way of thinking of it is an even number of negative signs will always give us a product of a positive number. If we have an odd number of negative signs, an odd number of negative signs is going to give us a solution of a negative number. Or if we have different signs. And here are some examples you can see. 3 times 5, 15. Negative 4 times negative 6, positive 24. Look at this one, a negative 1 times negative 2 times negative 1 times negative 2. Count the number of negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 negatives. Means our answer is going to be positive. The other thing you could have thought of is that what is, if we are multiplying this, negative 1 times negative 2? It is positive 2. Negative 1 times another negative 2 is going to be a positive 2, and how we could arrive at 4 that way. 3 times negative 5, negative 15. Negative times a positive, negative 24. In your notes, if you're looking at your notes, we are now on page 6 of your notes. If you would please make sure that you write this in right below two integers with the same sign, have a positive product, and please put even number of negative signs is going to give us a positive product also. Or quotient. Quotient, remember, is your word for division. Answer to a division problem. Product is the answer to a multiplication problem. So if it helps you to put the multiplication and division for key phrases to help you think of that. I'm at Ben Franklin right now recording this, and Miss Grinsteiner just left me. Positive times a positive. If we are looking at that, what is a positive times a positive? We just talked about that. Should be positive. Negative times a negative, or positive times a negative, excuse me, is negative. Negative times a positive. Again, we're going to have a negative solution. If you want to put a negative like this, I would also take that. Negative times a negative is our positive. If you want to use a plus for positive, that would be good. So if we continue and you don't want to write out POS for abbreviating positive, you could have positive, negative, negative, and positive. I would like you to give some number examples back here. So if you think of giving some number examples, pause the video right now, and then I'm going to give you some. Some number examples might be 5 times 2. 5 times 2 gives us 10. Next, we're looking at positive 5 times a negative 2. Positive 5 times negative 2, negative 10. Negative times a positive, negative 5 times negative 2. Notice I'm not using an X for multiplication. I'm also not using a dot. I like to use a parentheses because a dot sometimes looks like a decimal for some of you. Negative 5 times negative 2. A lot of times you might see both numbers in the parentheses. Sometimes you'll only see one of them, the one that follows that first digit. So we would be looking at a positive 10. Again, you're going to give some examples. Pause it. I'm going to give you some. 10 divided by 2, 5. 15 divided by negative 3. The quotient is negative 5. Negative 15 divided by a positive 5 would give us negative 3. Negative 15 divided by negative 3. It could also be written this way as a fraction. Negative 15 divided by negative 3. Both answers will give us a positive 5. In a few minutes, I'm going to have you put the guided practice, but right now I'm going to have you turn back to page 2 in your green notes. Why? Multiplication property of 0. Please remember tonight to go back and look at your other properties and definitions. The product of a number and 0 is always 0. Remember, when you add with 0, you get what you started with. When you multiply by 0, you end up with 0. The next one you're going to put down is the identity property of multiplication. Put it right with your identity property of addition. The identity in multiplication is 1. The product, any number in 1, is always going to be what we started with. And here's a couple number examples for you. We're going to practice just a little, and then I'm going to give you the guided practice. This first one would be a -10. Opposite signs. Same sign, even number. Answer should be positive, and in this case, we would be talking about a positive 36. Multiplying by 0. Remember, multiplying by 0 is always going to give us 0. Does anyone remember dividing by 0? Think of the video we watched the first day, division by 0. If I have any number at all, and I divide by 0, it's always equal to, I want you to put that in your notes, make sure you have that one. I'm going to give it to you in a minute. Pause if you need to. Think of that word, go back, look, think of the video. It is undefined. Now, what if you have more than one number that you're multiplying? Something like this. You can go from left to right. You could do 5 times 1 and get 5 and then take that. Here we're going to multiply the 5 times -11, gives us -55. And when we multiply by 1, we actually are going to get -55. Remember, multiplying by 1, that product is always going to be the opposite of the original. We talked about this already in your notes. An odd number of negatives gives us a negative number. Even number of negatives gives us a positive answer. You will be asked to do some evaluating. There's none in your worksheet or in your notes like this. But when it says evaluate, go back to your definitions. To evaluate. An evaluation is when you simplify. So you're going to substitute in, when you evaluate, you're going to substitute in the values. So in this case, we are going to substitute for our variables. And then after you substitute, you're going to follow your order of operations to get it down to one number value, if you can. One number value. So evaluate in mathematics means substitute in for the variables or simplify so that you have one number value. I can't even write tonight or spell tonight. Simplify. And as you can see in these videos, I make mistakes just like you do. What would we do first? We're going to substitute in. They tell us b is -12. So we're going to put 4 times -12 minus -8 squared. So we've replaced our two values. Order of operations says, do inside the parentheses. Well, inside our parentheses is one value, -12. So negative times a negative is positive, and in this case, we would have positive 48. The other thing order of operations tells us, think about our subtraction. We're going to keep this as subtracting, but we now want to evaluate -8 to the second. What does that mean? -8 to the second. It's different than if you don't have a parenthesis. So the parenthesis is really important here, and we'll talk about that in class. And we'll talk about it more next week when we evaluate. -8 to the second means -8 times -8. If you put it in your calculator with the parenthesis, you will get a positive 64. If you put it in without your calculator, it means this. It's like a -1 times 8 squared. Well, that means -1 times 8 and times another 8, which then would give us a negative 64. So notice how those are different. You are smarter than your calculator. I already know that. So in this case, -8 times -8 would give us a minus, keep the minus, and in our parenthesis we would put 64. But from yesterday's assignment for subtraction, we're going to kind of ignore these rules back here. 48, we're going to rewrite it as 48 plus a negative 64. Signs are opposite. We subtract and our solution is negative 16. I would like you to please write down for your guided practice on the bottom of page 6, problem 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And please give me their solution. We will talk about them tomorrow in class. Thank you.